I think what we're seeing from these pardons is that Trump is saying, if you commit political violence in my name, it is not only okay, but it is endorsed going forward. I would say it's a new era of funding streams for MAGA extremists. And, prior to January 6th and even after January 6th, the Proud Boys street gang got hundreds of thousands of dollars in GoFundMe's, in Venmos. Through my book, I found through research that regular everyday people were sending them $5, $25, $30, $100. This isn't coming from big dark money campaign donors. This is coming from regular people who believe that these people were out there on January 6th fighting for what they believed in. So that's what's so jarring to me. And so that infrastructure of funding obviously still exists today because Trump is back in office. And I can tell you for a fact right now that that money is coming in. I am looking right now at a Give, Send, Go campaign set up by the mom of the Proud Boys leader, Enrique Tarrio. It has thus far, since he's been released from prison on January 20th, raised $125,000.
Wow.
So what this tells me, as somebody who has covered this for a long time, not only are these people getting a wealth of money, are they getting a wealth of money from regular everyday Americans? They're getting a wealth of political cachet. They're getting a wealth of TV spots, as you said, right? They are enjoying political seats. Stuart Rhodes, who runs the Oath Keepers militia, who was also convicted in January 6th. He was invited to a Trump speech in a VIP box in Las Vegas, Nevada, after he was pardoned. And so these people are being held aloft as heroes. Surely the regular everyday people who thought maybe if they were convicted, I shouldn't donate anymore, that money's going to come back on real fast. And it's certainly concerning.
So this new chapter, that fascinates me because one of my thoughts in kind of reading through and just trying to get a grip on this was that surely Trump can't support, he can't vouch for, he can't encourage, he can't back these people. Now they have been pardoned. I mean, that is backing enough, clearly. But he can't continue that. He is the president. That should be the end of that connection with them. But that is far from reality.
Well, Trump was very close to, being judged himself in court for supporting them on January 6th, yeah. But he became president, so that's not going to happen anymore. He does support them. He supports anyone, and says it directly, supports anyone who commits violence in his name. And that's my big takeaway from this is I think what we're seeing from these pardons is that Trump is saying, if you commit political violence in my name, it is not only okay, but it is endorsed going forward. And so the big concern from an extremist researcher and journalist perspective is that it's not just that the Proud Boys are back. It's not just that the Oath Keepers or these far-right extremist groups are back. It's that everyday Americans believe that they will be supported by the president if they go out and attack their political opponents. And I assume that that will come quickly. I mean, the Proud Boys are going to take some time to regroup a little bit. They're obviously raising a whole bunch of money, but these groups are going to come back together, and we are going to see political violence in Trump's name for sure.
Yeah. One of the other things that absolutely beams through this reporting in the Sunday Times is the fact that prison was useful for these people. And perhaps we could have predicted this, but actually one of the lawyers for the people involved, this is John Pierce, who represented more than 50 defendants. He said for most of the defendants, it's galvanized them. And perhaps this is typical of a prison experience, but it is no less shocking that they were able to actually amplify their message, ramp up support, and coalesce around what action they had taken and wished to take while they were in prison.
Right. And I certainly appreciate the Times is reporting that stuff. That's something we're seeing too, is that, because of the way the American carceral system works, these people, even if they weren't pardoned by Trump, you're not going to get rehabilitation in the American prison system. And so, think of these guys as maybe a drug dealer going into the prison system. You come out after a certain amount of years, right? And all you know is that right before you went to prison, you made a whole bunch of money selling drugs. All of the people you know are people who are in, the drug arena. And so what are you going to do when you get out of prison? You're probably going to go back. And we have a huge high recidivism rate here in America. That's the same with the January Sixers. A whole bunch of regular everyday people became celebrities right before they went to prison. They were called political prisoners by Donald Trump. And now that they're out, what are they going to do? I could go try to have a 9 to 5 regular job, or I could go do some tweets in support of Trump and make hundreds of thousands of dollars, or go to a drag queen story hour and intimidate people with the Proud Boys. I could attack people at political rallies. This is easy work for the grifters of the far right, and I certainly don't see it going well for a lot of the people that came out. I mean, we're already seeing multiple January 6 defendants coming out of prison and committing crimes again and going to prison again. So
Yeah.
bad outlook.
Yeah. What about if we go back as well, Andy, to you've tracked the Proud Boys, the evolution, I suppose, of the Proud Boys for years. I mean, it was the best part of 10 years ago that we first connected to consider this rise of this extremism in the US. And I just wonder how you view, I don't know what the word is, the status, I guess, of the Proud Boys now compared to then. How has that evolution happened? What is at its core?
Well, first of all, I feel really old that you said we met 10 years ago, but yeah, it is an interesting question because, first on one hand, I think that the leaders who were released from prison are certainly going to try to come back into the national spotlight. Enrique Tarrio's raised $125,000 already. A bunch of the leaders are going to try to coalesce under the Proud Boys banner. Regardless if the Proud Boys name continues, I think that their mission to normalize political violence as an option for everyday Americans was already successful. And so whether or not the Proud Boys name continues, you're going to see all of the same faces we saw during the first Trump presidency. You're going to see the neo-Nazis and the far-right extremists and the guys dressed up in like football gear, fighting leftist protesters in the street. Whether they're under the Proud Boys name, I'm not totally sure, but it's going to be the same faces. And again, the atmosphere is such here, and the pardons created a new atmosphere where people are going to feel comfortable to get out there, commit political violence, and assume that the president is going to bail them out when it happens.
Yeah. It's just astonishing. Remind us of the roots of the Proud Boys. Were they a sort of street gang? How did they launch? How did they begin?
They are a product of the Trump era and sort of this new online, testosterone fueled bro podcast era. They were founded by Gavin McInnes, who co-founded Vice News. He had a sort of reactionary, bigoted podcast for years that. But at the end of it's sort of like maybe a Joe Rogan or an Alex Jones type podcast, right? Mm. It's totally reactionary, totally bigoted. There's some comedy segments, yada, yada. He had an nationwide audience of these like angry right-wing bros. Mm. And the difference between him and maybe Alex Jones or Joe Rogan is that at the end of his podcast, he would turn to the camera and say, the crusty old white Republicans in government are not going to go out there and attack and fight physically against our political opponents. You need to do that. And so his audience went out there and did that. And they sort of, through his live podcast, all of which is still available to stream, which is crazy to me. Through his podcast, he built the Proud Boys and built this nationwide network of funding streams and violence to where if Trump said, or any of Trump's allies said, hey, there's a drag queen story hour in North Carolina, you would have dozens of armed men show up at that drag queen story hour at a children's library and intimidate and attack people. And, that, that atmosphere and the funding streams in the last year seemed to be cut off a little bit after the Proud Boys were sentenced over their January 6th role. The funding spigot seemed to turn off, but now that the pardons have happened, it's back on.